Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Prachalane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschaktate Shatadane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The Vedic literatures often talk about purushartha, or human goals, what is valuable for the human being to attain. And generally the four purusharthas are artha, dharma, kama, and moksha. Four purusharthas. Of course, Lord Chaitanya says there's a fifth one, prema. So this is more or less the basis of the Varnashram civilization, because it embodies these four goals. So we have the basic needs of people, which are called artha. So they have to eat, they need a house, they need some facilities for raising children, etc. That's the artha. And they want a little bit extra enjoyment. That's called the kama. And then there are rules by which they should achieve these things. That's called dharma. So they have to work within certain limits in order to attain these goals. And connected with that is liberation, an understanding that finally material goals are not the only thing, and we have to strive to get beyond that. So in other words, the purusharthas in the Vedic system have a spiritual goal, though people in general will not be so much interested in that, and they're trying to achieve the other goals, artha and kama. So if we analyze those goals, of course, we'll find that they are present not only in India or in the varnashramic system, but they're present in all human beings. They have some sense of these goals, but they're not organized very systematically. So that's what distinguishes the varnashram system from the other systems of the world. It very methodically organizes the goals. And at the same time it realizes that different people are different and they have different needs. So therefore the goals will also be slightly changed according to the type of person. This also introduces the idea of adhikar, or qualification. We can only do action within a certain qualification. We have an adhikar depending on our qualities and our nature. That produces our qualification, and according to that we do our activities. So we can't give everybody the same activities because their qualification is different. Why? Because their qualities are different, their nature is different. So we can't say everybody does the same thing. So as a recognition of variety within the human species, and therefore the human goals are adapted to different types of people. And even the spiritual goals follow the same process. So the lowest part of the system is this varnashram system, to at least satisfy people, materially speaking, at the same time give them some spiritual connection. So that's the lowest system in the varnashram plan. So that's the Vedic perspective on human goals, purushartha. And human beings get satisfaction from maintaining themselves. If they get survival, that's a satisfaction. Getting a little extra enjoyment, that is also satisfying. And some people also get a joy from simply following the principles of proper living, proper righteousness, so to speak. In other words, they get a pleasure out of following the rules properly, and acting according to what's right. That's the Dharma aspect. So they get pleasure from all of those things. That's the Vedic point of view. So if we just take the world as a whole, of course, and we start analyzing people, then if we take modern system, we can start analyzing people. They make these surveys. What's your goal in life? What do you need to be happy, etc. And they take populations of so many surveys for population, this group or that group around the world. They take all these types of surveys, and then they come up with some answers. So in that type of research, modern research, they've identified 15 goals that are common to humans, all humans. And of course, some of them goals will be stronger on some people, and some will be weaker in other people, like that. So, on the physical level, on the personal level, each person, they have we could say a desire for knowledge, independent of purpose of knowledge or whatever. They like to know things. It's the quality of a human being. Ultimately, it's also a quality of the Atma itself. The nature of the Atma is he's a knower. He perceives things. He's gyata. He's a knower of things. That's the nature of Atma. So that's, of course, he knows himself and he knows the truth about everything. But when it gets distorted through ahankara, then we have mind and intelligence there and body, etc. Still, the human being, even in his covered state, has a desire for knowledge. And we'll see that in young children. As they start growing up, they're very, very curious about everything in this world. We'll find that even in animals to some extent. They're a little curious about things, and they experiment with things, like monkeys will experiment with things, or birds will experiment a little, figure things out, or even mice. So human beings more so. They have this, because they have more developed intelligence and mental capacity. They're very curious about so many things of this world. And if that is satisfied nicely, then the person gets a lot of different types of knowledge. Of course, different people are going to be attracted to different things because their nature is different, so they get interested in different things. But if that need for knowledge is satisfied by supplying them certain types of things, then they're very happy with that. Maybe the present educational system is not so perfect because it's all categorized, everybody gets the same knowledge. But some people maybe are not interested in any of that, and they want a different type of knowledge, and they don't get it, so they're not satisfied. So we have to satisfy that need for the satisfaction of getting some knowledge of things, but it may be different in different people. So that's one need. Another is exercise, physical exercise, health. We find people panic now that everyone's locked in their houses. They can't go out. And suddenly you can go out, everybody runs out of the house and they're going all over the place doing things, yeah? And even while the lockup was down, at least you can go out and go for a run or go for a walk. You can do that. Because people have this need for exercising. And of course, it's good for your health, obviously. And it is artificial if people simply sit all day in one place in a closed room, etc. It's not good for you anyway. So exercise of some sort is essential for the human being. And at least some minimum level should be there. And if people don't have that urge for that, probably they're sick. So they should have some desire for at least a minimum exercise, like walking or something like that, if not more than that. So that's one thing that is there. And we'll find that is also there in even primitive societies. Even though they get enough, we could say, exercises by doing their work or whatever, they do have extra things they do, like games and whatever, which they do exercises also and train themselves up in different ways. One need is there. Another need is, a very obvious one, is eating. Everybody likes to eat, and they're satisfied with eating. This, of course, is also there in the animals. And it's also necessary for survival to eat. Human being is a little special because we sophisticated this eating propensity with the taste idea, and we make things very fancy visually and then with certain tastes, and this becomes more attractive for people. So the eating is mixed with some sort of taste pleasure. It's not just to get the nourishment, also satisfying to your taste, in the sense of your tongue, which is one of your senses. So people get satisfaction out of eating. That, of course, has its physical aspect of nourishment, and then it has the extra satisfaction of tasting. Some enjoyment is there. So that is necessarily there in all human beings. And, of course, it's quite prominent, we'll see, in modern civilizations. If we look at any modern civilization, a lot of the businesses are based on eating. All rows of restaurants or something like that everywhere, if you look at all the different businesses going on, probably half of them are restaurants for eating. In spite of the fact that people have in their house also a kitchen and everything, and they go out and they start eating also. So eating is a big goal for many people. And of course we have a science of it also, cooking and all this stuff, and people get excited by that. And sex life, of course, very, very prominent in modern society particularly, is commercialized and exploited. And people make money out of that. But it's also a human need, and it is also recognized within all societies, including the Varnashram system. So that's why most people get married. Retaliation, which is kind of negative in one sense, but if it's the revenge emotion, that if somebody does wrong, I have to pay him back somehow. So this is a common goal in some people. As most people, maybe it's not there, but some people is quite prominent, that if something happens to them, they have to do back. So it's also a peculiar thing. Another goal is avoid pain. This is negative again, avoid pain. Nobody likes pain. So we try to avoid that as much as possible. Okay. Another need, which is, we can say a little bit going off the personal level, is organization. Of course, some people don't like to be organized so much. Other people like to be very organized. So it's one of those things that varies with different amounts of people. But there has to be some sort of organization there. Even the animals do that. They have their own organization. Like the birds all fly orderly in a flock like this, and very nicely. And they organize where they're going to eat or whatever like this together. So human beings also need organization. They have to plan things out. So this is one of our goals also, to develop a good organization strategy for the individual level, and of course when they get to groups it's even more essential that we organize things. But even on an individual level we have to plan our day and plan our life and plan different things we're going to do. So organization is very necessary. And this is one of the things that a human being can excel in more than the animals can. We can have much more complex systems and for us and whatever. Another need is independence. Everybody wants their independence. Often when we look at history, you'll find the first there were the slaves and the serfs, etc., and there's people over them, and they're very controlled. They have very little independence, and then gradually they rebel, and then they throw down that system and they establish another government or whatever like that, like French Revolution or something. So this idea of independence is, of course, we find India also under the British. Then they fought and they got their independence. Like countries, individuals also want their independence within that society, and if they feel it's threatened, they get very, very fearful. And that's one of the things that's taking place in some countries of the world now. They think you're taking away my independence by saying I can't go outside and I can't do this and I can't do that. That's our liberty, and our essential freedom. You're taking it all away, so they get very agitated by that. So that's a reflection of the independence. The people want some and need some sort of independence in order to function properly. So that's a need we have to take care of. Everybody needs a little bit of independence. At the same time, we have to cooperate with others, but it's one need that is very essential for human beings. So these are more or less individual. Then we get interpersonal things, social relationships. So this is another goal, friendship. In some people it's a stronger need, in some people it's a lesser need. So we find that, for instance, in the Varnashram system, the Vanaprastha and then the sannyasi, they're giving up all relationships. But other people can't do that. The grihastha cannot do that. So they're very attached to the relationship. So that's according to time. When one gets older, then one can give up all those relationships like friendship, etc. And it's described how the topmost sannyasi is the parivrajaka and the paramahamsa. So they just walk away from society completely. They don't depend on anybody for food or anything. And the parivrajaka means he just wanders everywhere. Parivrajaka, wandering around everywhere. So nobody's there for him. And in the Paramahamsa, he's completely aloof from the whole world. So they've renounced relationships completely. But most people cannot survive like that. And they need the relationships between people, the friendship like that. So it's a need for people. I guess we can say that some animals are like that. They are social animals in groups. Others are independent animals. They go up on their own and do everything. But some are very social. They go around in groups all the time. So human beings like that. It's just mainly they're in groups. Very few are off on their own. But we get a few like that. Okay, so friendship. And connected to that we get closer friendship. That is family. It's a goal in life. And therefore we have the grihastha ashram. This is the major ashram in society. We have brahmacharis, grihasthas, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis, but 98% is probably grihasthas. And the sudras are the major part of the population. They only have that ashram, grihastha ashram. They don't have a brahmachari ashram. They don't have a vanaprastha sannyasa ashram. The sudras just married life. That's their satisfaction. So family life is a huge goal for most of the human population. If it's not satisfied, there's going to be a lot of trouble. And if it doesn't go peacefully, there'll be a lot of trouble. So we see in Bhagavad Gita, in the first chapter, where Arjuna begins to complain about having to kill people in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Then he says, the result of all this killing of the men will be the women will be left with no husbands. And then as a result of that, all the varnas get mixed up and things like that. And then the whole family unit is disturbed. And finally the population that comes out of that is disturbed also. So in other words, a peaceful family unit is the basis of a prosperous society and of a happy individual. And if he doesn't have that, then there's a lot of disturbance in society and on the personal level. If all the families in the world are happy, it would solve a lot of problems. But unfortunately that's not the case. So we get a lot of social problems because of this. So family, happy family, that is one of the goals of human beings, which means husband, wife, and children. So that gives satisfaction to most of the people. And a lot of their life is centered on that. Another goal is social service. That is, like in the Varnashram system, we have punya. The grihasthas should be charitable to other people. So every day they're supposed to go out and announce, anybody's hungry, come to my house, I'll feed you. This is called atiti seva, serving the guest. And it's also one of the 5 great yagyas, or sacrifices, you have to perform every day as a grihastha, to absolve yourself of the sins of accidentally stepping on bugs or burning them in a fire or whatever. One of the mahayagyas is nurseva, serving humanity. And how do we do that? Feeding them. You feed people. Of course, there's also many rules for that in the Vedic system. It's not you just feed some undeserving person. You serve the guest in your house who is in need of food and is of proper qualification. It's not just anybody. So you should have some qualities also, a deserving person. So anyway, social service is emphasized in the Vedic system, especially for the householder, because he has the ability. The brahmachari cannot do much household service because he has no money, he has no house, he's just studying. And then the vanaprasthas and sannyasis are renounced, so they can't do anything either. So it's the grihasthas that are responsible for doing this. And it's also we can say one of the qualities of the human being, because they are social animals, that they will serve each other. So they're not completely selfish. I guess it's like the communist theory of Marx or something, that you don't need a state because people will naturally have a society in which everybody is equal, serving each other. That's the theory, at least. So it's partially true that human beings do have that tendency to do that if they are, let's say, not psychologically disturbed or anything, or raised in the wrong way. They'll want to help other people as well. So that's one goal in life. Another goal is influence. This is also connected with other people. People want to have some influence over other people. They don't want to feel completely isolated and powerless. They want to have some area where they have some little authority. Maybe little authority, maybe bigger authority. So it may extend to a few people, may extend to their family members, or it may extend to their community, or if it's a company, it may extend from, thousands of people that one has influence. But that's also a goal of humans. They want to be able to control people a little bit. And if it's not satisfied, they get frustrated. They need their little area of control, little kingdom, so to speak. Social acceptance. They want to feel part of the group. And we find that particularly in little children, when they're growing up, then if they're not part of the group, they feel very disturbed because nobody likes them or something like this. So people strive for social acceptance. This, of course, is another aspect of Maya, because all the standards of acceptance in society are pretty arbitrary, but nevertheless, the human beings do want to be part of the group. They don't want to be, disregarded by others. They want to be accepted by others. So, if arrangements are made so everybody's in the group, then there's happiness there. And another goal is respect. People want respect. They don't want to be insulted, disrespected, etc. So very, let's say, it's an interrelational aspect of needs, but nevertheless, that need is satisfied in normal societies by having rules of etiquette. And we have rules of etiquette within the Vedic society to maintain that sort of respect. So we have rules for conduct between different people, between the family members, the parents and the children, for instance. or the parents and their elders, and that. So, and then we have relationships between one family and another, and how they interact, and there has to be some respect there. And then, of course, there's the government, the king. Everybody has to respect the king. So all sorts of respect are there, and it's also a personal need of everybody, as well as being, let's say, a necessity for maintaining order in society. It's also a need of each individual. He needs that respect. Morality. So this is another thing, ethics. A sense of what is right. This is, of course, assuming that we don't have completely evil people who just like to do the worst things possible and enjoy it. So there are people like that, but the normal person, they do have some sense of what is right, the right thing to do, and they would be satisfied if they can do the right thing rather than the wrong thing. So also influence on people. Okay? So this is largely satisfied by the rules of Dharma. They support doing the right thing by making a whole series of rules to follow. This is the right thing to do, that's the wrong thing to do. So the ethics are clearly defined in the system of Dharma. So, concerning the physical, one's own physical body, then we have these various things like education, possessions, health, recreation, work, money, etc. So these have to be satisfied. Then we have relationships with others. So we have family and children, husband, wife, children. We have the interaction with society, interaction with friends. So all of these needs are there, and if we're satisfied, we get happiness. So we got the physical aspect and then the interrelational and mental aspect of things. And if we can get these satisfied, we get happiness in the material world. There's a problem, however, with the physical needs, because the body that we have is impermanent, and the objects that we get to satisfy ourselves are also impermanent. So there's a little bit of frustration there. We have to make a continual effort to get new things, which means we have to exert a lot of energy to do this. It becomes very, very taxing for many people to do that, especially if they have their basic goals are more ambitious. Instead of basic satisfaction, they want more of something. Therefore, they have to get higher goals, and therefore they have to put more effort into it. So, therefore, the result is competition. Everybody's striving for their goals for themselves, physically, mentally, etc. They have to compete with other people. And then we get more conflicts this way also, because everybody's competing for the same things. So we get a lot of anxiety in living like this. Very, very difficult to live. We have self-interest, and then we get conflict. We want relationships, because if we have self-interest, then we get a conflict. And so therefore we become very disturbed. So to satisfy all of our human goals that we have, we end up with more problems. If we get the conflict, then what happens? Anger, which is very disturbing. Or we may get fear. Another, depending on the person, they have different reactions to this, the conflict that takes place. Others will simply lament. Others will get aggressive, and they'll fight. So this is because the needs are not satisfied, and they're under a lot of stress to get their needs. So therefore, The result is all of these problems. Okay, so you get dissatisfied with continually working to satisfy physically your needs. Then with relationships, you get dissatisfaction because there's a conflict between your self-interest and the person you're relating with. They also have their self-interest, and we get problems there in friendship and marriage, etc. And consequently, we get very confused about what is the real meaning of life. And consequently get depression. Everybody gets depressed. So we get stress on all levels, physical and mental. We're trying to get happiness, and to try to get the happiness, we end up the opposite, depressed. Yeah. So this operates on the individual level, it operates on the broader social level, it operates within the whole, on the global level as well. Everybody is, the whole world is stuck into this stressed out mentality of wanting things and not getting things. Yeah? And in that position, everybody ends up in panic position, and we get financial crises and things like that, or we get food crises. They're worried about food crises now, and even the most prosperous countries of the world, because everybody's sitting in their houses, and what happens? They can't get the food to the market. Yeah? So we get food crises. Or there may be no food at all because there's no rain. And we end up, because of all these problems, we end up with environmental crises. A lot of pollution everywhere. And because of this whole friction and whatever, we end up with political crises as well. Revolutions. Whatever. And then, of course, we end up with wars. Countries fighting against each other because they can't get their needs satisfied. So, of course, war is a combination of all these things. You get your food crises, your financial crises, environmental crises, and political crises. You're bound to get some bigger conflicts taking place because of that. So the present mode of society has not really solved this problem. How to satisfy, how to get all these 17 needs satisfied in a peaceful way. There's no solution. We keep trying different things. Arranging the finance, arranging the political situation or social condition, doesn't seem to work. Yeah. So basically we have to solve the problem of an impermanent body and unstable mind, but these you cannot escape that. The body is impermanent, and no matter what we do, we cannot make it permanent. The mind by nature is fickle, and we can't do anything about that either. It's unpredictable. So very, very difficult to solve this problem in the world. Yeah. However, Bhagavad Gita and Krishna, they give us very simple solution to all of that. You're not the body at all. You're not the mind. Mind is unstable, body is impermanent. You are neither of these. You're the Atma. The Atma is permanent. Atma is kutastha, is very stable, it's unchanging. So if we realize we're Atma, then we can be very satisfied. And this will help solve all these other needs that we want for our body and mind, etc. So if the body and mind and the Atma cooperate as a whole, then we'll get satisfaction. If the Atma is dissociated from the mind and the body, then that's why we get these problems. So as I mentioned in the beginning, Artha, Dharma, Kama was there, but then that was also linked to moksha, that you're not the body at all, you're the Atma. So the spiritual understanding was accompanying, satisfying your body and your mind. And that's why that system works okay. If we take the Atma out and we just have Artha, Dharma, Kama, it doesn't work. And that's what most of the social systems in the world are made of, Artha, Dharma, Kama. We have to get the Atma in there somewhere. Then we get the functioning things like that. So we have our physical body. We got our mental body, so to speak, our subtle body. But we also have the soul. We cannot neglect any of them at this present time. But if we neglect the soul, the other two parts cannot function properly. So there's always going to be dissatisfaction. So, what is this soul? What is this Atma? We cannot define the Atma by material logic or experimentation, because the Atma is spiritual. It is not subject to material laws or material qualities or whatever. Senses. It cannot be sensed, cannot be perceived by material senses at all. So we have to go to the scriptures to understand the nature of the Atma. Nevertheless, we can confirm it by realization, which is why for thousands and thousands of years the Vedic scriptures are accepted, because they've been confirmed by people. If they were just words which were untrue, people would have discarded those scriptures long ago as having no meaning. But because they got a realization from them, and they realized that words are true, they preserve those scriptures for thousands and thousands of years. So, the soul is not temporary or destructible, it's eternal. We have eternal knowledge, our perception is eternal, it's not indestructible. We have eternal actions, we have eternal bliss. Previously, when we talked about the needs of the human being, we said knowledge is one thing. Little children want to get some knowledge or whatever. So the Atma by nature is inquisitive and wants knowledge, and wants to gather knowledge, and can gather knowledge. It's the nature of the soul to get knowledge. However, in the material world, that knowledge that we have is all limited and temporary, because it's material. When the Atma is operating, then we get eternal knowledge, which is very satisfying. So, the soul also has eternal action. This is reflected in the human body. One of the goals of the human being is exercise. They want to do something. So, naturally, that is there also in the soul. The soul is active by nature. And of course, this is in the spiritual world. What is that action? Is serving the Lord. We like to serve the Lord in various ways. And all these goals were leading up to happiness. If we get our knowledge and our social relationships and our family and our friends and our sense of respect and morality, etc., then we feel happy in this world. But as I said, it's all temporary and subject to conflict. With the soul, no. Happiness is natural to the soul. It's an experiencer of bliss. And that bliss is eternal. So if we can realize the soul, then we can solve all these problems that we got, or we can satisfy all the needs that we got. Yeah. So because we do have a body, we still have to take care of our bodily needs, our family needs, our social needs, etc. But it should all be based on a spiritual realization, the soul. And all the things like the children and the society and the family and the friends and our body, etc., should be connected with the soul. That should be the center of everything. So, the unfortunate thing, of course, is all of these things, the society, the children, the spouse, and the friends that we're trying to get happiness from are temporary, not eternal. And instead, if we establish a relationship with Supreme Soul, that is, Supreme Lord, then we get eternal relationship. We don't depend on bodies anymore in the material world. Of course, relationship means two are involved. So one of the needs of the person in the material world is relationships, through friends or family, etc. But temporary, because it's related to body. So that need is satisfied by having a relationship between Supreme Lord and Atma. Then we've got a relationship which is satisfying because it's eternal. A soul acting with Supreme Soul. Spirit with spirit, not spirit with matter. Or not matter with matter. It's spirit and spirit acting together. So a perfect eternal relationship. Okay, so why is Supreme Lord? Why not just another jiva? Why can't we have another relationship with another jiva, another Atma? So Supreme Lord is the perfect person, with perfect beauty, with perfect qualities, perfect actions, and perfect response. He is full of all wonderful qualities, so he's naturally the object of affection for the jiva. It's the most satisfying relationship. This does not mean we cannot have relationships with other Atmas in the spiritual world. We do. So therefore, in descriptions of the spiritual world, we don't just see one jiva with Krishna. Krishna surrounded by many gopis, many cowherd people, many cowherd boys, many cows. He's always surrounded by many. So it's not just one person with the Lord, it's many, many, many. And they also have relationships with each other. But the major relationship is with Krishna, because he is got everything in its most concentrated form, the bliss, the beauty, the qualities, etc. And therefore, that relationship is the most satisfying for all the jivas. Of course, we can say, well then, so many jivas are vying for the affection of the Lord, how he'll ignore us. But no, Lord is the Supreme Lord, so he can expand himself into millions of forms to satisfy individually each jiva. So there's a personal relationship that is very satisfying. Okay. So the Lord, relationships was one of the needs of the human being. So we have friends and we have family, etc. So that relationship is also there with the Supreme Lord. So we have very well-defined relationships. So you can act as a friend of the Lord. The Lord can be your child, the Lord can be the lover, the Lord can be the master, etc. So we have all these relationships there as well. So the master relationship is dasya rasa. Of course here Arjuna actually is in sakya rasa, but it's got a little bit of dasya there also. And when we have sakya rasa, where the Lord is equal with the devotee. So they exchange things very freely. So that was a need within society itself. Everybody needs friends. So here in the spiritual world you can have the Lord as your friend and acting as an equal with you. One of the needs was to have a family with children. So you can have Supreme Lord as your child also. And another was the marriage, so therefore you have Madhurya Rasa in the spiritual world also. And all of these relationships are satisfying and perfect and eternal. So, unfortunately, we're stuck in the material world, in a material body with a material mind, which are dragging us to material objects. So we have to change that situation. How do we establish that eternal relationship when we're stuck in identification with the body and still striving for these material things? So the process is bhakti yoga. Unlike karma and jnana and stanga yoga, and this process does not reject the material world outright. Of course, we all know ultimately everything is Maya, but Bhakti Yoga is a process which engages the material world and our material senses. Instead of rejecting the senses and the mind, etc., and stopping everything, it engages everything in the service of the Lord. Of course, we can challenge and say, well, it's Maya, why? But then, it is pointed out that Maya is also the servant of the Lord, Maya Devi. And if you're a devotee of the Lord, then Maya will also serve you. So Maya will not have the same effect on a devotee as Maya has an effect on other persons. So therefore we can use material objects, we can use our material body and our material senses in a certain way, and we get no harmful effect from it at all. Rather, it encourages us to advance in our devotion. So that development of bhakti or devotion takes place within the Atma. It's a cultivation of bhakti in the Atma, like you cultivate a seed and make it grow gradually. So the bhakti is like the growth within the Atma of a seed. Or we could say the whole Atma is growing into something else by its cultivation of bhakti. Eventually it turns into a devotee in the spiritual world. Because he develops a spiritual form, etc. So, anyway, it's a cultivation within the Atma. It's not a mental cultivation or a physical cultivation. It's a spiritual cultivation of the jiva himself. And as that devotion increases, then his spiritual form begins to manifest. So, how do we cultivate the jiva's bhakti? So we engage the material senses and material objects to do that. And we still get a spiritual effect, even though it's material. So we use the ear, which is very physical, with a little eardrum in there and a little hammer there, or something like that, vibrating from the air coming in. So that's very physical and material. But if we're hearing about Krishna, then that has a spiritual effect on the jiva. So it's not regular material sound anymore. And we can have the eye to see the form of the Lord. And though it's chemical reactions taking place to see that particular color and the particular form, etc., we get spiritual effect because of looking with devotion. So in other words, the Atma develops attraction to the Lord by our using our material sense. So there's a connection between the sense and the jiva. And bhakti develops by seeing the Lord. We can use the voice to glorify the Lord in kirtan. So instead of talking material things, we say the name of the Lord and praise Him. And we get, Atma gets spiritual effect from that, even though it's material sense. Smell, so we smell the incense offered to the Lord, or the flowers offered to the Lord, and we get spiritual effect again. We take the prasadam, the food offered to the Lord, and we get a spiritual effect. We have taste from the eating, but it's spiritual taste because it's offered to the Lord. We can use the whole body, dancing for the Lord. In Jagannath Puri, they had all these dancers, and they're dancing and performing the pastimes of the Lord in front of Jagannath. This is Bharanatyam dancers, or Odissi dancers, like this, trained up to dance before the Lord. So though we're using our physical body, we get a spiritual effect from that because we're pleasing the Lord. And we use the mind to concentrate on the Lord, meditation. Of course, of all of those, the main process that we follow, following Lord Chaitanya, is Nam Sankirtan, chanting the holy name. So this is using the voice, and again, it's material sense, but we get Atma develops its devotion through that. And what is the devotion? It's a relationship with Krishna. So when we get that relationship, everything is satisfied. All the other needs that we have are satisfied with Krishna. Okay, fine. Any question?
Hare Krishna. You spoke about, Jesus having relationships, obviously. So I'm wondering if do jivas that are really close in the material world, if they reach spiritual advancement, can they attain like the Loka Vrindavana together, so to speak? Like we meet up with your friends and family in the Loka Vrindavana, if all of you guys happen to reach that in your life, like say, especially your immediate family, like your close friends or husband and wife, are these jivas going to keep their bond in the spiritual world?
Well, not this body, obviously, but they may develop a relationship which they could keep to some extent, because as I said, in the spiritual world we have so many jivas, so they have a primary relationship with the Lord, but they also have relationships with each other. So if you are on the same sampradaya or with the same mood, etc., then likely you'll be there together in some way. The relationship may be slightly different or whatever, but definitely, and also in the spiritual world we cannot limit our sense of knowledge, etc. So many billions of people there, how can you recognize anybody else there? But nature of Atman spiritual is quite different, so we have that capacity to recognize things and whatever. So one of the things is that in cultivating, especially Raga Nuga Bhakti, then one go following in our sampradaya and whatever, then we're joining a certain group. So we join Radha's group, for instance, in Madhurya Rasa. And within that, then there's a group of manjaris, and then within that, there's another group like that. So basically, if you take initiation from one guru, that guru and his the whole parampara is in that same group ultimately in the spiritual world. And so they're all serving together. You're talking about the karma.
Yeah.
So how is that interesting? How do we?
Yeah, I don't fully understand how, because this senior devotees don't get involved in the group karma of the person, so don't try to help that person, otherwise you can karmically get the same reaction of that person.
Oh. Is that some form of preaching? I don't know. I haven't heard of that argument. Group karma. Don't get involved with somebody's group karma. Obviously, bhakti destroys all karma. So if we engage people in bhakti, we help destroy their karma and maybe the group karma as well. So I don't think we have to worry about that too much, because we're protected when we are serving Krishna. Bhakti is a inconceivable process with inconceivable power. So it's able to adjust everything and minimize our problems, etc., if we're performing the bhakti with sincerity. So, and of course then we have Krishna's mercy behind us anyway, so he'll protect us in any case, even if we make mistakes.
Train of thought that I had this influencing that the human being by nature
Maybe like influence somebody.
has some sort of aspect of influence. So when we sort of, that's a general aspect of the individuality of the human being. So that is on one sense there's that connection there that we sort of we want to be the supreme control and that sort of subtle aspect of it, and that's the sort of natural thing that comes out of the material world. But then we have all these systems, like you were saying, like that ideal utopian system of socialism, for instance. So that scope actually just gets completely squashed. That everybody's on that same that everybody's supposed to be friendly towards everybody else. So that sort of minimises that, but they sort of tend to...
Well, that's maybe why the communist system doesn't work too well. Everybody tries to get on top of the other person anyway. Which both things are there. The idea of, okay, we don't want to compete, etc. We're all equals in one sense. But then there's other instinct that wants something, so we have to adjust those very carefully.
So then we have the concept of spiritual communism, which is sometimes bandied about in Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
The good thing is that in the same token, it's like spiritual communism. When we come into that spiritual realm of our society, we're told to forget everything that you know and just sort of obey orders. So in that sense, that sort of whatever sort of our desires as an individual are, to sort of influence, it sort of gets thrown into a bit of confusion there. So how do we come out of that?
Well, if it's a top-down system, it looks as if it's antithetical to this idea of independence and influence, etc. But if we look at the Varnashram system carefully, we'll see that that's a little bit adjusted, because the people who have the prominence of influence, they become the kshatriyas. And their desire to influence becomes, satisfied by that. Other people get their influence within the family. So the husband gets his influence over the family, wife gets her influence somewhere like this. So it's adjusted on a minor level, a lower level for most people. Then of course we have within the community itself, let's say the Vaishyas, then there'll be a influence there also. These ones control these sections, they have different groups within the Vaishyas also, and they have their little area of influence there, like the guilds in medieval society or something like that, and they had some powers, and they had some leader also. So we get, and even among the cowherd people, we have Nanda as the leader, so then he has area influence there also. So within smaller groups we can get the influence. If we can't get the bigger one, we get a little one like that. So in that way that desire is satisfying. And then in the Varnashram system, what holds it together is ultimately the sense of they understand the leader, the king understands he's not the material body anyway, so therefore that lording it over tendency doesn't go out of control, and he doesn't exploit with that. He just uses it to, organize the society properly and do it as a service to the Lord, but he doesn't try to exploit it for his own purposes. But then it's okay.
So ultimately, the Varnashram system does come into play on the spiritual level.
In relation to society and things like that. In other words, devotees, if they're Babajis or whatever, they don't have to worry about that. But other people do have to worry about the society they're in. So therefore, then we have to have some rules of how people interact, and then that's where the Varnashram system comes into play.
So in the meantime, as devotees in our sort of stages, in the early stages of devotees, where we could, supposed to just follow the four rules and regs and just go through the process, the early process of sadhana. How can we channel some of those desires that we have inherent in us?
Like the independence and the... Well, then you can adjust that with that heavy, tough down structure and whatever, but at the same time, it can't be too inflexible, and then it has to cater to the needs of the people. So then, in that sense, everybody has got their respect and their position within society, and the upper people don't interfere with that. So in the varnashram system, the king is there and he's authority, and he does not interfere with the family of the Sudra and what he does in his family, so he's got his independence within his family, and that's protected in some degree.
Just on the topic of importance of personal needs, it seems like as bhaktas we kind of get guided to not to just focus on bhakti and things related to bhakti yoga, and kind of say we have interests outside of that, whether they be, literature or sports or whatever it is, even though that may be a passion for us, to sometimes neglect that. And it's kind of been my observation that people who neglect what their personal interests are,
they get a little frustrated.
They kind of throw them out of balance a little bit.
Yeah.
It's been my experience also that sometimes these side interests that may not be directly related to bhakti actually end up bringing people closer to bhakti.
Sure.
Like I have a friend, for example, and they would tell me they went on a Vipassana retreat, and their devotees friends had told them not to do this retreat. The silent speaking meditation, and actually found going on this retreat actually enhanced their bhakti in the long run.
Oh, okay.
So there's obviously this balance between neglecting what you're passionate for, but then sometimes the things that you're passionate for actually bring you closer to bhakti.
Yeah.
But sometimes, but in other instances, it's going to distract you.
Yeah. Sometimes we get too passionate about it, we get so much into it, we lose our bhakti also. So we have to balance it out, obviously.
Yeah, I know for myself, I'm into sports and things like this, and I find that when I neglect that for too long, I feel without touch.
Yeah.
And when I bring that back into my life, it brings a bit of balance back.
Yeah. That's because it says that exercise was the one of the needs of the human being. So some people have more emphasis on that, some less, but nevertheless everybody needs it. And some people have more need for it, and if it's suppressed, then they won't be happy. So they have to express that somehow or other.
So in other words, you think it's important for people to still pursue, as following bhakti yoga full time, to still pursue their personal interests and somehow...
and somehow harmonize it with our activities within bhakti, but nevertheless we can do those things. Yeah.
The question is with regard to health and emotional and physical health. I've sometimes seen that some devotees say that we are not transcendental, we shouldn't be. Some devotees say you should just chant Hare Krishna and everything will be fine. And then some want to use some alternative methods, but you find that they end up having more faith in that alternative method rather than the process of consciousness. So,
Well, we should, let's say, combine the things together, balance them out. Obviously, if you're very sick, then you may go to the doctor, and you don't have to say chant Hare Krishna. You may go to the doctor and get your tooth pulled out or whatever. So, we do what's practical. And if we do have a mental problem that we can't overcome, we may go to the psychiatrist or the psychologist also. How much they can cure is another thing, but anyway, we may find various ways in which we can help the situation. At the same time, we understand that if we stick to the process of bhakti, it's obviously going to support it and make whatever cure other processes have, it'll make it better. So we shouldn't over-rely on them, but we may use them in certain circumstances. Okay, Hare Krishna.